What is your origin story of becoming a dance medicine PT?
So I became a dance medicine physical therapist because when I was a dancer growing up, and I never had the it factor of like being a professional dancer. I knew that was like not my career path, but I loved the dance world. And so I was like, how can I stay immersed in the dance world without being a dancer? And I feel like a lot of PTs, their story is like, I hurt myself and I went to PT and I did this, that, whatever. I was always very interested in I don't want to get hurt. How do I help dancers not get injured, and like the preventative side of things and improving performance? And so I sort of decided early on, I don't know, I kind of just had this crazy idea, like, I think I'm going to be a PT. And I think it's pretty rare that somebody as a teenager is like, I'm going to do this, I'm going to be a PT. And it just worked out. Like everything lined up so perfectly in my path. So I don't feel like I have this really crazy story of like, I got hurt and I had to do this and that. I really just found something that I loved, knew that I couldn't be the dancer. And so I just figured out, well, how can I still be in the world?
You wanted to just immerse yourself in it.
I did, yes.
Okay, you know what's interesting? For me, that's how it happened with tennis. I've worked with the top players in the world. I've never been a professional. I've never been a collegiate. I wasn't even at high school level, but I loved the sport and I loved everything about it, and I just immersed myself in it. So anyways, it's awesome. That's awesome. What makes dance PTs different from traditional sports PTs?
I think a lot of dance PTs are different from like the traditional PT in that most of us were dancers. We understand the language. We understand the demands of the sport, right? It's like any physical therapist that works with like a specific sport, right? They understand the demands of it. I think what really makes dancers unique is that there is the athletic side of things, but it has to be combined with the artistry. And so when you're working with a physical therapist who's in the traditional sport world, they understand strength and conditioning and rehab and all of that, right? Like anybody can treat that. Any good PT can treat that. What they don't understand, though, is the artistry of it. How do I make sure that my dancers can jump 50 times over the course of 2 minutes and make it look like they didn't do anything challenging, right? Like they have to understand that there's a fluidity of movement there. There's just all these other different elements that's not in the traditional sports world.
Right.
So I think that the artistry is a huge piece of it. Understanding the demands of the schedule, and there is not, as dance physical therapists, I think we all know that there's no periodization that works well for dancers. In the traditional athletic world, it's very straightforward. There is a season, in season, preseason, off season. Like we don't have that in the dance world. And so if you get a traditional physical therapist, they're like, what do you mean you dance harder in the summer than you do in the winter and there's no break? And they don't get it. And so a lot of times the response is, well, don't do that, or don't dance, or whatever. Tell your teacher you can't do that. And they don't understand that that's not going to fly. Yeah. And the dancer is going to be like, bye, see ya. I don't want to work with you.
Once a dancer finds out that you don't get that, they're pretty much checked out, I'm assuming.
They're gone.
Yeah.
Yep.
Wow. I love it. Love it. Have you ever felt isolated as a dance medicine PT, and how did you overcome it?
I have absolutely felt isolated as a physical therapist, a dance medicine physical therapist. I would say I was really lucky when I first started out. I worked in a clinic that was a dance medicine clinic. So I was super lucky in that I was able to learn from a mentor and, grow in the first probably 3 years of being a PT. After that, when I moved to Virginia, I suddenly didn't know anybody, and I especially didn't know any dance physical therapists. There was one other clinic in the area, and still to this day, there's only one other clinic in the area that works with dancers. Oh. So what I learned is that the dance medicine world is extremely small. We're a very tight-knit community, but it's a very small community, and it's very hard to connect. We all like to connect in person, right? And there isn't a lot of that in the dance medicine community. It's and a lot of times the clinic director that you're working for, your coworkers, they don't get it. They don't understand. I can remember working with dancers I was in a clinic. It was a pretty good setup when I moved to Virginia. It was really very mindful of patient care. You know, it wasn't too much of a PT mill. But even then, I would work with my dancers and I'd have them bring in their point shoes and I'd sit with them and we'd do all the corrections and very in-depth. And I remember my clinic director being like, you can't do that. What are you doing? Give the tech can do that. And I'm like, no, they can't. And they just had no idea why it's so important that we look at all these little nuances of how the point shoe fits and all this and that. So I think it's really important to find people that understand what you're doing, what your goal is working with dancers, because I don't think in the traditional model of healthcare and physical therapy, that's just not the way things work. And it can feel very isolating to feel like you are trying to step so far outside of the mold. I think we need to step out of the mold. But
yeah, you know, it's just like you have this, it's its own world. It's its own world with its own language, with its own mannerisms.
Yeah.
And if you don't understand that world, then you can't communicate in it. And the natives of that world, the dancers, just are like, you're not one of us.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
that's awesome. What's something dancers say about injuries that drives you crazy?
I think the biggest thing that drives me crazy with dancers is that they will say, my pain was like a 9 out of 10, but I just kept going. And I'll ask them like, well, how long has it been going on for? Thinking, oh, maybe it's like a month. And they're like, well, the past 3 years.
Wow.
They have their pain threshold. And I think the expectation, what's expected of them is so high that they will just push through absolutely anything. And then what's even worse is that in the dance world, in the traditional dance training, it's very much a no pain, no gain mentality. A lot of the teachings, the teachers, what they're saying is, well, I had to go through it.
Right.
So do you. And so I get these dancers that 3 years plus of these chronic injuries that now have turned into 5 other injuries.
Yeah.
And it drives me crazy that they don't know that dance medicine, physical therapists exist. They don't even know that it's a thing because it hasn't been, it's not mainstream,
right,
like something else is. And they just think that it's fine to keep pushing through and that eventually it will go away when we know so much better.
Right. What's a shared experience that only dance PTs in your community understand that normal PTs just don't get?
I think most dance medicine physical therapists in our community, I think one of the biggest things is that we know that there isn't a good way to periodize strength and conditioning.
Yeah.
It's really, really different from the traditional sports setting where, again, we have that like in-season, pre-season, off-season. And so normally I think in that setting, it's very easy and very clear-cut of how we need to work on strength and conditioning. But we don't have that in the dance medicine world. And research doesn't do a great job it hasn't given us really any solutions either. So I know when I'm talking to other dance medicine PTs, it is the one topic that seems to constantly be coming up. And nobody has a good solution. And I think we need to keep talking about it. We need to keep networking with each other and connecting and, hey, what's working for you? What's working for you? Because so many of us have things that we've found in our little area that are working, and making it more widespread will help the profession greatly.
So I'm going to ask you another question that's not on here because I'm kind of fascinated with this.
Yeah.
Do you find that the average person that you're working with ends up getting injured so that they get a season off season that they weren't even expecting? Like, does that happen, or are you really able to keep people like good throughout? Because I know that when I used to work with tennis people, and they would never stop, right? Because tennis was kind of similar like that a little bit. That what would end up happening is those that just did not know how to throttle it back, and I wasn't able to convey that with them, they ended up having an off season anyways. They were just hurt.
Yeah.
Does that typically happen?
Yeah, I think the really serious injuries, absolutely, that's what happens. And I always try to frame it for them like, nobody wants to get injured. That's the last thing that any dancer, any athlete wants. However, we can use it as an opportunity to bring you back stronger and better than you ever were pre-injury. And that's the goal, right?
Yeah.
And I think that that's what makes my practice really successful, is that our focus is, yes, okay, maybe we have this moment where we need to pause, but we are going to take that pause and we are going to make it worth every moment of your time so that you're going to come back better than you ever were.
I love that. I love that. Okay, that is powerful. We're going to use that in there. Okay. All right. Next category. We're going to talk about the love-hate. So why do so many dance PTs struggle to get and keep dancers in the clinic?
I think a lot of dance medicine physical therapists struggle to keep dancers in the clinic, both to get them in the door and then kind of retain them, is because they are trying to work sometimes in a system that doesn't work for dancers. It's like putting what's the saying? Put a round peg in a square hole.
Yeah.
The traditional healthcare model doesn't work for dancers. It takes a lot more personalization, a lot more individual one-on-one time, I think. And very, maybe not even one-on-one time, but just very specialized attention to detail. And so I think when you're working in a traditional clinic where it's fast-paced, the dancers are left very, they don't have a clear path. Nobody has ever taken them aside and said, like, hey, here's how it is. Like, this is what we need to do to get you. Here's the clear path of how you're going to get from injured to performing better than you ever were.
Right, gotcha.
And if you're not used to doing that, and I think for a lot of PTs that aren't used to working maybe in a, not even a cash-based model, but in a model that allows for a lot of time like that, then they're not used to walking them through that process.
Right.
And so they never make the dancer understand what it's going to take to get to that higher level. And it's so important that we walk them through that process.
Right. Makes sense. What are some of your biggest pet peeves on traditional dance training?
My biggest pet peeve in traditional dance training is that, I have two. Number one, and if anybody watches anything that I ever put out there, they know it's overstretching. Oversplits, the hypermobility, the flexibility. I think a lot of dance PTs feel extremely passionate about this, but it's incredibly polarizing because you have the dance PTs on one side, the dance medicine community, that is like, do not overstretch. It is so bad for you. Here's all the research. Here's all the things. But then you have the dance world, the dance community, who is promoting overstretching. They see it on social media. And they're very young, impressionable dancers. Like, that's what they want to do. They want to achieve that whatever they saw on TikTok.
Right.
And then you have, the dance teachers who are advocating for it. And you have us over here.
Wow.
And so it's very polarizing. I feel very strongly about it because I've seen one too many injuries from it, and it doesn't need to be that way. So that's my number one pet peeve. My second pet peeve is that dancers believe that dancing injured is the norm.
Wow. Okay. We're going to talk about that more. All right. What's something that makes you squirm every time you see a dancer being treated in traditional PT? Go ahead. You can call them out.
I think probably the thing that makes me squirm most about traditional PT, dancers in a traditional setting, is that they often are just told to stop dancing. And that goes not even just PT, but when they see a doctor, whoever they're seeing, they just say, well, you need to rest, don't dance, which we know is not the case. In fact, often it's the opposite. We need to work with the dancer and figure out, how do I keep you dancing in some capacity because it is your passion, it is what you love to do. And again, if I tell you to not do that, you are running for the door. But if I can explain to you and maybe find a way for you to do something like a plie, and all of a sudden you don't have pain anymore, now we can use that and we can say, okay, here's how you're going to modify your class. That is 10 times more beneficial to somebody than telling them they can't dance.
And it keeps them mentally in the game. You know what I mean? Right? It just keeps them like motivated. Like, okay, at least I'm able to do something. Okay, I love that. What's one rehab technique you swear by that other PTs would call unconventional?
One rehab technique that I probably use, I don't know if I would call it a rehab technique, but for me, it's having a membership program. Because it's not, I guess it's not a technique, but more of just like the way that I run my business. My goal is not, yes, the acute injury is a big deal to treat, but any dancer that comes in the clinic, from the moment that they start talking to me, the first visit, they know that their goal is far beyond their acute pain. That it is, how do I keep you in the game long term, and how are we going to turn that into the best performance that you can have. So it's not treating the acute injury almost, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it makes perfect sense. Okay, so you talked about this earlier. I want you to dive into this a little bit more. How do you respond when doctors, therapists, or coaches tell the dancers, just put a boot on it and stop dancing? Like, how do you get involved in this? And what do you say to the dancers? And what do you say to them?
Yeah, it's a huge pet peeve when all the time a dancer comes in and they're like, I've been in a boot for 5 months. And then the doctor told me to take it off and they told me I could just go back to dancing. And it is difficult. It's a difficult place to be as a physical therapist because you don't want to say your doctor's wrong. I want my patients to have trust in their healthcare team. So it's a delicate balance of helping them understand why that may not be the most beneficial thing. But I also have no problem going against a doctor's order if I know that it is the right thing for the dancer. And I will call the doctor, and I'll call the doctor on it and be like, this is not helpful. This is not what the dancer needs. And again, I think it's a really slippery slope because you don't want to destroy relationships. Like we want to create relationships with these doctors, but I will say in doing it, I think a lot of doctors PTs are afraid of doctors for some reasons. And I think that they appreciate when you call them on their shit sometimes.
Yeah. I love that. All right. Let's talk about the, you have a lot of new grads that are going to be listening to this. So I want you to talk to them in this first one. So if you're a new grad who wants to become a dance PT, but you feel lost on where to start, here's something that I wish somebody told me when you got started. What would that be? So speak to the new grad right now.
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna tell you something that I wish somebody. Well, I'm glad that they told me, but it makes me mad that they told me this. I very vividly remember when I was working my first job. I had an amazing mentor in the dance medicine space, but I was working on a project, a workshop or something like that, and I was using some newer techniques, right? She was an older therapist and trying to be innovative. And she looked at me and she said, "Why are you trying to reinvent the wheel?" And I still, to this day, that is what has driven my career. Because I believe that's exactly what you should be doing. Reinvent the wheel. So if you are a new grad, that's what I think you should do, is look at the system, whether it's treatment, creating a business, whatever it is, and figure out, how do I make this better? Because that's how we push things along.
Love it. That's so good. Okay, a new grad. How do you overcome imposter syndrome as a dance medicine PT? How did you overcome it?
I think it's really hard. Imposter syndrome is really hard. I still struggle with it every single day. Sometimes I'm like, why? How do I know enough to coach another PT on how to treat a dancer, or to coach PT on creating a business? Like, what do I really have to offer? But I think at the end of the day, you have to look at your strengths and what you're good at and filter out the noise. Social media, we see all these things, and sometimes you start comparing yourself, like, oh, well, that PT's doing this, and I've never done that with my dancers. That's a really good idea. And you just have to filter it out. You have to look at, like, I know that I'm really good at treating dancers, and I know that I get really, really good results. So just because this other PT over here is like talking about some really great results that they've had, or some really cool programs they're doing, or this and that, it's not always real life, right? It's a front of social media. And so filtering that out, I think, will help people overcome that feeling of imposter syndrome.
I love that. Okay, what's one simple thing you can do today to start getting dancer clients? So let's just say they know how to treat, but they how do I get the clients? What's one thing you would tell somebody to do?
Yeah, if somebody wants to start treating dancers, you just need to put yourself out there. Start walking into dance studios and say, hey, my name's Jenna. I'm a physical therapist. I treat dancers. I would love to do a free workshop for you guys. I mean, most people aren't going to turn down a free workshop. Right. So you just have to put yourself out there.
Oh, love it. how can someone start to connect with dance studios even if they're nervous after reaching out? And you kind of said it, like doing a workshop. Is there any other things you would say?
Yeah, for me, sometimes it is hard to make a connection with the dance studio because they're like, who is this girl? What does she do? Is she going to change? What is she going to like tell us what we're doing is wrong? So I think a really good technique or tactic is once you start having a few patients, use that patient to sort of bridge the gap. And like, it's like your soft entry into the studio. The dance moms, they are fierce, man. They will talk to each other. If you do a good job, everyone is going to know it. So don't be afraid to be like, can you take some of my cards? I would love if you heard somebody saying that they needed something, just pass out my cards. They're like, yeah, absolutely. Give me a whole stack of them.
Wow. Here, let me ask you something. This is not on here. Are most of the dance moms like that show? You remember that show, Dance Mom with the lady Abby?
Yeah. Do you know that they just recently filmed this round of dance mobs? They filmed, if this tells you how our area is for dance, it was filmed about 20 minutes from where I live.
Really?
Yeah. It's in one of the really big competition studios.
Is she still around?
So it's a different lady now.
It's a different lady
I'm
now.
sure this other lady's still around, but
Yeah,
it's a different lady.
Wow. Okay, last question with this. What are 2 to 3 things you could tell your younger self when you started working with dancers?
I would tell my younger self, I kind of already touched on this, but to not be afraid to reinvent the wheel. That the only way that you are going to get somewhere in your business, financially, in that work-life balance, whatever it is by questioning authority a little bit, going outside of what the norms are and not accepting that as being the norm, and kind of going to the beat of your own drum sometimes, but it creates something really special.
Right.
I also would tell myself that it is absolutely possible to create a job and a career that you love, truly love, walking into work every single day.
Yeah, I think that's really important for people to know that this is truly an opportunity. And there's nothing better than working within your calling, and you're truly passionate about something. I mean, you see, like me, I'm just so freaking fired up for this stuff, you know. And it doesn't matter. Like, the funny thing about it is I did all this for free for so long, and I think if I would have told somebody what I know today is like, if you get really good at the things that you would do for free, eventually one day you'll actually get paid for it. So
it's kind of amazing when it happens.
Yeah, it really is. It really is.
Yeah.
Just focus on being the best. And it's hard to be the best when you're really not passionate about it. You know? So.
Well, and I'll tell you too, a mantra that I have lived on for a really long time, since before I had my business. I don't know where I sort of came up with this idea, but this idea of living a life without Mondays. And my husband used to think I was crazy.
Yeah. Wow.
He's like, nobody does that. That's not real. And I just believed with all my heart that was possible because who says, right?
Yeah.
And I feel really lucky that I truly live by that, and I've created a life that has no Mondays in it. There's no Sunday scaries.
Yeah.
I mean, I want every PT, but every dance PT to feel that.
Yeah.
It's real. It happens.
If you're working with the people you want to work with, there are no Sunday scaries, and there are no bad Mondays. So that's awesome. All right. Stories and beliefs. What's a fear new dance PTs have that holds them back from getting dancer clients?
I think a lot of new dance PTs, especially if they're a newer grad, is feeling like they don't have anything special to offer, that they're, just a PT. I mean, yes, we have our dance background, but that they don't know enough to go out and get their own clients or to start networking or, anything like that. I think that they just are afraid to put themselves out there.
Yeah. Sure.
And you know more than you think you do.
Yeah. Awesome. Can you give a story of a time you thought a new studio would never be interested in building a relationship with you, and now you have a great one with them? You have any stories like that?
I have a great story. I had I've had my business for 8 years in the same area, and it's taken me 8 years to build some really solid relationships. That's a long time. The dance world is hard to break into. I'm not gonna lie. The dance community is a very tight-knit community. And so when you have an outsider that comes in and is like, hey, I'm going to help you and make your studio better and do all these things. It doesn't work very well. And I learned that the hard way. And so there is a professional company that is kind of close to where I am. And for years, I tried to make contact with them and reach out to them and offer free services and all these things. And they never really had any interest in working with me until recently, only in the last year. I treated some of their dancers enough that they started seeing like, oh, wow, like she really gets some good results.
Yeah.
And it started by them asking me to come in and do like some backstage care for them. And so I did that for a little while. And then recently they just asked me, and my goal was like, I'm going to like infiltrate and I'm going to make this a healthy company. And I'm going to do all these things that we dream about as dance PTs. And just recently they asked me to be on the board.
Wow.
And that was like a moment for me where I'm like, things start to all line up. And you're like, this is what I've dreamed about being able to do since I was a new grad. And all of a sudden, it took 8 years to get there, which may be the long route.
Yeah.
But it takes that long sometimes to build relationships, but don't stop, because you keep that momentum going and eventually people are going to have to listen to you. You just make them listen to you.
I'll talk about it more tomorrow, but it's relationship, friendship, partnership. So 8 years is long, but there's some relationships that's what it's taken to go into a partnership. So from 8 years of, okay, they didn't know who you are to now being on the board, no, that's kind of about right, you know? Kind of that's what it takes. So that's awesome. Okay, another story. So tell us about the first time you realized dancers needed a different kind of care. Like what happened and how did it shape your journey?
Yeah, I think I first realized that dancers needed something different when I was a new grad, and I was working in a dance medicine PT clinic, and I did my first like backstage rotation. And I don't think up to that point I really understood what it took, because I was never a professional dancer. I don't think I understood what it took to put on a production like that, and how dancers needed to be supported physically, mentally, all of that. And so that was pretty early on in my career. And then, you know, you just keep striving to make that better as the years have gone on.
Yeah, love it, love it. Okay, tell us about a time when a dancer came to you with an injury and you knew you had the power to change their career trajectory. What's a time where you're like, oh my gosh, I can do this?
Yeah. I've had a lot of really cool moments in my career, and it honestly is hard to pick one, but I think in particular, I had a dancer who she was, was it her knee? I think it was her knee. Yeah, I think it was her knee. She tore her ACL. That's what it was, which is a very rare dance injury. Like we don't see that very often. And she wanted to be a professional dancer, and it's a hard route. Professional dance world's a hard route. You have to start young. Unfortunately, it's one of those careers where age does, unfortunately, we wish it didn't, but it does play a factor into companies' decisions to hire. And so she was sort of on a timeline, and was feeling very frustrated by, she had seen all kinds of other physical therapists and this and that, and wasn't getting anywhere, wasn't getting good answers, wasn't getting good solutions, and didn't have a clear path of like, how am I going to be able to audition? My auditions are coming up. Like, how am I going to be able to do this? And I think from the moment that she came in and just being able to lay out that plan of like, here's where you are, here's where you want to go, here's what you need to do to get there. It motivated her because she had a very clear path, instead of like, I'm treating you with your ACL injury like I treat a soccer player who it's a very different thing, right? Your career, unfortunately, does sort of have I hate to say that because I wish there wasn't, but
it's kind of a shelf life.
To get into a company, there is. And so, but yeah, we were able to get her, she auditioned, she's a professional dancer. Yeah, it was great.
Wow, that's amazing. Walk us through the moment your first dancer client came into your business. What did that feel like for you?
The first time that I saw a dancer in my own business actually wasn't even in my clinic. I was a mobile physical therapist. I didn't have money for for anything. So I had my little Tupperware kit and my table, my portable table. And I definitely remember walking into her house and being like, what am I doing? I think I wish that it was like, oh, I've arrived, but I think it was more fear of like, I don't know what I'm doing. I have no business background. They don't teach you business in school. No business background. And like these people are trusting me to come into their home. I don't know what I'm doing. So I think it was more fear than anything. But at the same time, there was that moment of like, I'm going to do this. Like, this is amazing. This is going to be my career. So yeah, it was a little,
a combination of what the heck am I doing here? I have no business being here. It's like, all right, I got this. Yeah, I love it.
I think a lot of dance PTs probably struggle with that feeling of like, what am I doing? I like deer in headlights almost.
That's honestly thinking the first time I ever worked with a player on my own, I was just like, what the hell am I doing here? Like I'm totally out of my league. So
well, then a lot of us feel that. Think back to them and you're like, how did I get anybody better?
Yeah. It worked. Okay, these last 5 questions, these are rapid fire tips and solutions. So, okay, how do you help dancers balance rest recovery without losing progress when getting back to performing?
Balancing rest and recovery, but still improving performance is not an easy task. But I think the key is in making sure that they don't stop. So whatever capacity that needs to be, they're probably going to modify, but you're not pulling them out of the studio. Even if they truly need to rest and not be dancing on their foot or whatever it is, they can be in there, they can take notes, they can visualize, they can walk through their choreography. So don't take them out of their environment. And then if they can be, find the things that they can do and focus on those.
Gotcha. How can I learn more about assessing and treating dancers?
There is not a lot out there about learning how to work with dancers. There's not really very many CEU courses. There's not a lot of mentorship programs or anything like that because it's a very small community of us. But I think the best place that you can probably start, well, 2 things, reach out. I think the dance medicine PTs are pretty active on social media. So just don't be afraid to reach out to us. Usually we want to connect with you. We want to help other dance PTs because we're all so passionate about it. We love sharing and connecting and all of that. So don't be afraid to reach out. But then the other biggest thing I would say is join IADAMS, which is the International Association for Dance Medicine and Science, because you will find your people. Your tribe is waiting for you there.
Love it. How do you improve buy-in and adherence to plans with dance patients?
This is a tough one. But I do think that I don't know if crack the code is the right word, but I feel like I've cracked the code. So being able to kind of create buy-in to a PT program and making sure that they're going to stick with it. Number one, again, they need a very clear plan. They need to understand not what I'm going to do as their PT, but they need to understand their part in it. It's an agreement. They need to know these are the things you need to do. PT only works if you put in the work. So they need to know, here's what I'm going to do and here's what you're going to do. And here's how we're going to do it together. And then also creating a program that can easily be put into their lifestyle because their schedules are crazy. They don't have time. They're trying to manage school, friends, their insane schedules. They're at a competition every other weekend. They don't have time. So you have to figure out, you need to be innovative. You need to be creative and figure out what a program needs to look like for that dancer. And it does need to be a little bit personalized, but there's ways that you can kind of make it work for larger groups of people, but it does need to be somewhat individualized.
Okay, love it. How do I market myself as a dance PT without feeling salesy?
I feel like any PT, we get icky at the word like sell, gotta sell a package. Cash PT, it's like you first go into that model and it feels icky. And I'm not sure why. I think that if the dancer can see your passion about it and they can see that the system that you have and the process that you take them through, that it works, and that there is a strong motivation behind it, and that you really, at the end of the day, you just want them to meet their goals, and making sure that they understand, like, that they, you know what their goals are, that you're listening to them, then it's never, you don't feel like you're selling anything. You're just presenting to them, this is what you want, here's how you're going to get it, and here's how I'm going to help you. And it never feels, I can honestly say, I don't ever feel like I'm selling anything.
I think you believe in what it is that you're doing.
Yes, very much.
You understand that there is a commitment level, not only from you, but there's a commitment level from them. Wherever the treasure is, there the heart will also be.
Yeah.
And so when I see people invest in what it is that I can do for them, it makes me feel like I'm not wasting my time. Whenever they're investing, it forces them to be committed to the plan. I think it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
I think it's an amazing thing. So that's awesome. All right, final question. How do I build relationships with my local dance community?
To build relationships with your dance community, I think you need to just put yourself out there. Go walk into a studio, take a class. I think that's a really great way to not just say, hey, I'm a dance PT, but to actually sort of walk the walk of like, I really get this, I really love it. Most studios have adult classes, so that's a really great way to kind of immerse yourself in it. The thing that I have found to be most successful for me is to really sort of, not even so much with the schools, but the parents and the dancers themselves, when they understand what you do and how well it works, they're going to go tell their friends no matter what.
Right.
So if you don't feel comfortable walking into a studio and taking a class or selling your services to them, then you can just let your work sort of show, right? Like my business, I have never marketed in 8 years. I've never marketed my business. It is all word of mouth. And it's really successful based on word of mouth. So if you're really good at what you do, then that's kind of, I think, all you need.
Love it.